So people ask me, James, why do you dislike home inspectors so much? Well, I don't necessarily dislike the inspector personally. I just dislike the process. So let me give you a few examples of this property right here that I'm selling. Just got inspected by one of the old great quote certified inspectors. We'll just call him Brian. Now you see here, for some reason, the carpenter bees love this corner. Now some of it we've gone through and filled, and some of that was damage from the previous year, and there's even a dead bee up in that one. We treat that every year. Every year we treat that. But he wrote that up, and the buyer said that she needed that treated immediately. Even before she would make the deal, she wanted me to treat it. Well, it's January. It's January. The carpenter bees come out in the spring. There's no reason to treat it now. It would do no good. Also, she demanded that I treat for termites, which we do every year. Didn't ask for proof whether I had done it or not, but because the old home inspector Brian brought it up, she said I needed to get that done and give her a receipt before she would buy the property. The other thing, Brian, the home inspector, was brave enough to crawl all the way underneath here to the northeast corner of the building, and he found some water in there. Well, the reason he found water is because this, as you can tell, is pretty new now, had broken and was leaking and allowing water to get down into the foundation there. Well, we had replaced that maybe a day before the inspection because we didn't realize it was broken. So it had been broken when a big rain had happened, just maybe at 2 days before the inspection. So of course there was water down there. But there's no process to allow us to say, we knew there was a problem, but we've repaired it. He put in the report, there's water underneath the floor, needs to be addressed, need to have a qualified, competent professional look at it. Well, it's fixed. But there's no process to allow us to even acknowledge that. It's just the home inspector's word is, as my mother used to say, the gospel. And it's got to be fixed. It's not whether we fixed it already or like the carpenter bees. We treat that every year. But no, the buyer wanted it treated right away. Wanted it treated for termites, which we've done every year. But again, there's no communication. It's almost legalized extortion, because guess what? Now she wants $7,500 off the price. We agreed to it because I get so sick of dealing with these home inspectors. It's ridiculous. Let me give you another example of why I dislike the process. Backflow preventer. The reason there's a backflow preventer in here is this used to be a dentist office. Well, as you can tell, it's no longer a dentist office. The reason you have to have a backflow preventer is if contaminated water is in the lines and the water turns off for some reason, there's a water break or something, the water that's in the lines internally in this building will not siphon back into the main water system. So what happens with the backflow preventer is when it senses it loses water pressure, all that water dumps and goes back down in here and out into the city sewer. So it doesn't allow the water that has already entered into the building through this pipe. This is where it comes up from the city. This copper pipe goes up here, goes through the backflow preventer, and then onto the building. So again, if it loses pressure on this side coming from the city, it'll lock here and allow all the water that's in the building to dump out in through here and out into the city sewer. Well, Brian, the home inspector, said that this needed to be checked because he seen it had a little drip. And now, of course, she wanted it replaced. She's an accountant. Guess who does not need a backflow preventer? Anyone that's not medical or has contaminants inside the building. An accountant doesn't need a backflow preventer. Very costly. Wanted me to pay for it. Wanted me to give her a receipt that I had it fixed. Thanks, Brian. And last but not least, so in here is a sub panel. I've already removed the inner cover. Brian wrote up that the neutral and the ground are on the same bus bar. I would agree. There's you some ground, some bare copper. There's you some neutral, some white, all on the same bus bar. Was code up until maybe 2008 that you could do that. It's not in the new code, but this was built prior to 2008. So, of course, she wants this all replaced. And she wants this all replaced over here. Not cheap. And wanted me to provide receipts that I did it. If Brian would have taken a moment to look at this sub panel, let's just take a look here. Off, 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 and off, all the way down through there. This sub panel is not even online. It was used for some of the heavier things when the dentist office was here. Some of their suctions, x-ray equipment, things like that. You can still see some of the plugs in this room. But it's not even being used. Again, Brian, the home inspector, said it needed to be, quote, evaluated by an electrician and repaired and replaced. Of course, she demanded that based on Brian's advice. So that's why I don't necessarily dislike the inspector, but I definitely dislike the process. So what needs to happen? I think I'm going to take it up as a personal mission. Is there needs to be some type of mediation when the report comes out to where the seller can basically discuss and have some input on the inspection, and the buyer doesn't just think, oh my God, all these things are terrible. I gave you some great examples outside. I gave you a few good examples inside. This is a great little building. But the buyer's convinced it needs $7,500 worth of work. And she wanted it taken off the price. But to avoid stress, I went ahead and did it, because you know why? Most sellers do. That's why I used the word extortion. I'm not saying it's extortion. Maybe legalized extortion. As Paul Harvey says, that's the rest of the story that the seller never gets to tell. I'll leave you with this.